Ladies, I am so excited to welcome you to 21 Days of Happy. You both are so inspiring and just beautiful, beautiful lights in my life and in the world. And I can't wait for the world to hear what you have to share. So I'll start with you, Miss Deya Smith Taylor. And Deya, you are just a fabulous. You were Miss Black USA. You graduated from Howard University, and now you have. How many books have you written?
3 so far.
3, and can you tell us the titles?
Yeah, so the first book is apropos for today's show. It's called Touch Yourself, 30 Ways to Boldly Live, Love, and Let Go, which is really about self-love and being in touch with yourself. The second book is called Failure is Fuel, which really deals with how to overcome your fears and how to use it all as fuel to get to your next level. And then my most recent book is called Soft is the New Power, Embracing Your Feminine Edge to Win in Love and Life. And so that kind of speaks for itself, but it really deals with emotional intelligence, self-care, and really how to use your femininity, both spiritually and in relationships as a strength, as well as at work and not a weakness. And you don't have to work against yourself as a woman. Being a woman is more than enough.
Yeah, I love that. And you're also called Deya Direct. You're an author, certified life coach, creator, and host of Super Power podcast and the Super Self-Care Power Summit, which I just love and adore. And Colleen, you're a powerhouse in your own right. You're a writer, producer, creator, as well as you're the founder of Soul Care LA. Can you talk to us about that?
Yes, well, Soul Care LA is a vision that I feel like I'm still birthing, but it's been a long labor process. I moved to LA to go to seminary. After graduating from seminary, I did a certification in spiritual direction, which is a contemplative Christian discipline. It's similar to counseling, but very different in the sense that spiritual directors are companions of other people's spiritual journeys.
Yeah.
And so Soul Care LA is the heart of all of that training and experience to just offer spiritual companionship to people in LA, in particular artists and entertainers.
Nice. And I know you've been exercising a lot of spiritual direction. You've led retreats and you've really helped people to tap into their own version of self-care and really to begin to rejuvenate and reset and relax and rest. And I know that those are some of the things that you're going to be talking about today with regards to self-care and how we in this busy, chaotic world can really take time for ourselves. Deya, I would love to know, you have a huge superpower podcast and summit, self-care summit. Can you talk to us about self-care and just things that we can be thinking about?
Absolutely. Self-care is one of those words that I think it looks differently on everyone. But ultimately, self-care is really the decision to prioritize yourself in a way that's healthy, spiritually, physically, emotionally, relationally, and otherwise. And so it looks different on everyone. For me, it looks like things like taking care of yourself in terms of your headspace, right? What do you say to yourself? That one counselor once said, the most dangerous place you can be is in your head by yourself.
Wow.
And for some people, that's true. And so you have to be very intentional about your thoughts. The Bible says, as a man thinketh, so is he. And so when you understand the difference between the brain and the mind being more so the spirit, then you understand that literally what happens with your mind influences everything. And when you understand that what happens with the brain influences everything that happens with your body and that it's all connected, then you realize that self-care is something that has to be holistic. So that's a short answer. And from a practical perspective, for me, it starts with what I say to myself, and then it starts with how I live out my life on a daily basis and doing things that support my spirit. And it could be as simple as candles. Aromatherapy works. You know what I mean? When you're stressed out, it can be as simple as going to sleep. It can be as simple as boundaries and not allowing people into your space when you know you need all of you for you. Um, so it doesn't have to be deep. You know, it can be yoga, it can be Pilates, it can be working out, it can be walking, it can be all of these things. But I think more than anything, as a life coach, I'm certified in social and emotional intelligence. And what that means is understanding yourself and others in real time and being able to manage that. So based upon what you understand to be true about yourself in real time, you make decisions about how you take care of yourself.
Wow, that's amazing. So if I, just really feel like, gosh, I'm not good enough, everybody else is stronger, more talented, more gifted, better mothers, better wives than me, or I don't see myself as successful, I don't see myself as worthy. How can I begin to transform those thoughts into a place where my actions will line up in a more healthy way?
I think that's really a great question. There's this scripture that says, in all you're getting, get understanding, right? So what does that mean? That means you have to understand yourself that you feel that way. So really, before you can address anything, you have to acknowledge that you're feeling some kind of way about yourself. Once you're willing to be honest in a non-judgmental way about the fact that, it's probably not healthy to have all these negative thoughts about myself, right? So so if you don't have the wherewithal to work through that, go and get some help. Self-care is going to therapy. Self-care is hearing yourself say these words, and sometimes just hearing yourself say what you feel with somebody who is non-judgmental and who is skilled will literally begin your healing in real time, because you're like, okay. If you just stay in your head, though, that's the dangerous place. So self-care in this case would be loving, understanding, and honoring yourself enough to know that I don't like how I'm feeling. I want to feel better. I don't have the tools to do it on my own. And then giving yourself permission to get the help that you deserve.
And I know that you have personally internalized this, right? It wasn't just something you read in a book. It wasn't just something you got certification on. This revelation actually changed and transformed your own life. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. In talking about it, it's like, which time? So for me, it was as deep as being married in my 20s and not choosing myself when I walked down that aisle, because even though I had the inkling in my heart and soul that this wasn't the right decision, everybody else had already invested in this relationship. And so that was one of the first times that I really um, acted out non-self-care and really abusive behavior to myself, because I walked down that aisle because I was afraid, thus failure is fuel, which is what spawned that book. I was afraid of disappointing others. And in that choice of going down that aisle, it almost cost me my life, because I didn't take care of myself, because I didn't choose myself. And so basically a year later, I took pills. By the way, never considered suicide, never had been clinically diagnosed with depression or anything else. Was a church girl, could not have told me that I would go that far. But, there's something to loneliness in this time of, COVID-19, and a lot of people are experiencing isolation. But isolation isn't just when you're by yourself. You can be in a relationship and feel isolated. You could be in a relationship and feel alone in all that you do. And I internalized all of that. I didn't feel understood. I did not feel supported. And more importantly, I was self-imploding. Why was I self-imploding? Because, as you know, Edwina, I was a theater major at Howard. And my dream was to move to Hollywood.
Right.
But because of the choice that I made to get married, and because we did not collectively agree that it was time for us to go to LA, I was feeling sorry for myself, and I was depressed. And so because I didn't choose myself, now there's a trickle down effect that occurred. And so I was disappointed in my own choices. And as a result, I was depressed enough to take pills, but I was also alert enough spiritually for God to quicken my spirit and make me put some of those pills back. And I'm an only child, so I thought about my mom and what it would do to her. And so I took enough to get sick, to get nauseous, and to get my stomach pumped, and all of this to get his attention, so he would see that he had hurt me. And I thought I had his attention. And yet his mom told him, well, if she tried to kill herself, she might try to kill you next.
Woo. Wow. Wow.
So he left me the next day.
Wow.
Needless to say, I had to pick my face up off the floor. And needless to say, during that experience and that journey, I realized that it was so important for me to be in touch with myself, thus Touch Yourself, the book, because expecting somebody else to make you okay, expecting somebody else to fix your problems, that's, everybody's on their own journey. So he was not equipped with the tools to make me okay. That was between me, God, and my therapist, okay? And so, yes, I understand that journey very personally, as you mentioned. And so from that point, I have been on a lifelong journey to not only heal and grow, but whatever I know and learned so far, to share that with others so that they can also live their best lives as much as possible.
That's incredible. And I know that you touch so many women through motivational speaking, through your books, through your podcasts. A lot of us are living very busy lives. And there are a lot of women and men that are trying to keep up with the Joneses, that want to maintain appearance, that don't want to admit that there are other things going on. And I wonder, what are some of the common things that you see amongst your clients and amongst your audiences that are really happening behind the scenes for people that seem like they have it all together?
What's really interesting is a lot of the women that I deal with in particular are boss women, women who are accomplished, women who, own their own businesses, millionaires. I mean, they're not, whatever you see boss as, they fit that profile. But even Superwoman needs to be saved sometimes. And so what I find is that people begin to take on not just the cape, but the image of who they've presented themselves to be in the world. And when they don't fit up to that, when they're not okay, they don't know how to not be okay. And so ultimately, what we do, and I say what we do is we keep faking the funk and we're dying inside. And so there are just a lot of people who are living facades, and they do more taking pictures than doing an internal look about who they are. So they look good, but they are not in touch with their truth. They don't have safe spaces to be real about when they're not okay. And so ultimately, it just gets worse because everybody's living that Instagram life. You're looking at other people. Correct. And most of us are lying a little bit. And maybe that's not a fair word, but we're
exaggerating.
We're producing You know what I
Producing,
mean?
that's a great word.
We're procuring what we want the world to see, but by doing so all the time, it also it impacts what you see as good. And so whenever you don't fit that bill, often you don't feel good. And I feel like this season that we're in right now is a time of resetting. You know what? Look, I can't get my nails done. I look crazy. You know what I mean? I had to do my hair. My toes
You
look
did a
off the
wonderful
chain.
job, by the way.
I'll take it. You haven't seen the back though.
Neither
Why do
have
I
you. We're all working through it.
why do I mention that? Is because it doesn't change who I am. And I
Right.
feel like the season that we're in right now, it's like take it all off and reset and really rediscover, like, what do I really care about? Why am I doing all this stuff? Is it for me? Is it for other people? What really matters? And so that word why will always help us in that resetting journey. Why do you do what you do? Why do you believe what you believe? And you go so on and so forth. And if you just use that word why, and then you answer those questions, it'll really shift your mindset about your intentions.
I love that. I love that. And I feel like that's a perfect time for you to jump in here, Colleen, because Colleen, you're a theologian, you're a contemplative, you're a spiritual director. And I know when I first met you, I was always amazed by you because at that time you were willing to go without a cell phone indefinitely. When everybody else was so busy with the world around them, you were always taking time and making space and creating a very meditative environment and lifestyle. And I wonder if you can talk about that, because I know that, you know, in our culture, we value productivity. We value getting things done. We value moving as quickly as you can and doing as much as you can, and being as prolific as you can. But I know that your teaching is somewhat antithetical to that, and I would love for you to share that as far as self-care.
Yeah. Well, it is, the contemplative life is very cultural. And you were one of the first people to really kind of call me a monk, I think, because of this resistance that I have to, it's not just technology, it's noise. Like I always, even as a child, really preferred quiet. You know, I drive in silence. My house for most of the day is silent. You know, one of a father of the contemplative tradition, who passed away recently, he says silence is God's first language. You know, so I look for opportunities to listen to the voice of God, you know, and while I know that that can show up for us through other people, through in community, through entertainment and film, you know, my first practice is always silence. And I think though in silence, and a lot comes up, you know, listening to Deya talk about this kind of journey we take in our minds and, you know, not wanting to get stuck there. How spiritual direction looks at that is, you know, inviting someone else into that inner conversation so that you are not on that journey through your mind alone, but also so you are cultivating a deep, real awareness that those inner places of discomfort are also spaces that God is present in. And our instinct typically is to get into some self-deprecating thoughts and then just play that record. But what I practice, because I've wrestled with that too, I invite God into those conversations, and the conversation can change pretty quickly when you begin to talk with God. I feel like a failure. I'm so disappointed in myself. Like when it becomes a conversation, it's as though if I were sharing this with you, Edwina, you would immediately have something to say to counter that false belief system that I am creating in my own head. I think it's natural. I think that God knows that a part of humanity is our wrestling with shame. I love the psalmists for this. It's like David didn't have any problems calling himself every negative thing and seeing the glass half empty. That's a part of, it's called lament as well, to be able to bring to God the truth of how we are feeling, as opposed to this instinct I think we have to bring to God what we bring to others, which is a performance. That God is really a safe space to, if nowhere else, we don't have to perform before God, but it is a practice, and I think it is an art, and I think it is a discipline, and it begins with believing that God actually is present in the dark spaces of our soul. We also tend to compartmentalize God. God is in the good because God is good. The light because God is light. A contemplative mystic belief is that light and dark are all in God. How can anything be outside of God? So in the contemplative worldview, God is present in darkness too. He doesn't want us to stay there, but he knows how to walk through it. It's not territory to him. It's foreign territory to us, especially I think as Christians, because we avoid it a lot of the times, and for a good reason. It's not safe to just walk through the valley of the shadow of death by yourself with just the thoughts in your head. But that's, I think, what my life's spiritual work has been preparing me for, is like, I love walking through the valley of the shadow of death with people. I've walked through it. I can be a companion. If you have to walk through it to get to the other side, some transformation, which I think this COVID-19 season for all of us is a huge invitation to transformation. But I think there's a discipline to seeing isolation as transformation instead of isolation as just being alone or not being able to do what we want to do, like really working the program, so to speak, of isolation, so that you learn that alone does not mean lonely. Sometimes it can. Sometimes alone is lonely. I've cycled through that during this myself. But it can also just be alone in the presence of God.
That's so good.
And
And yeah.
Can I speak a little bit to shame?
Sure.
Especially in this season. So I've definitely walked that journey of being laid off, and that transition of, just going through a life change and figuring out who am I now, right? How do I define myself? And this kind of piggybacks on what you asked me earlier. And so I really focus in my life coaching women who are not just bosses, but also who are in transition, right? And how do you tap into your superpower and figure out who you are now and who do you want to be next, right? What does that look like? Well, what happens is whether it's, being laid off or divorce or um, any kind of life change that a lot of people are now going through with COVID. What's really interesting is that even if it's not your fault, you have a tendency to feel a sense of shame because you know what, maybe your show is over and in LA it's very much, what are you working on now? And if you don't have anything to immediately say, and if that's how you've defined yourself alone, then oftentimes shame creeps in. But I did a recent podcast about when your life is interrupted as a result of COVID. And I had therapists on, and one therapist said something so profound because I wanted to ask her about why do people whose life are now currently interrupted for whatever reason, including COVID, why do we feel so much shame when things aren't always a certain way? And she said, shame doesn't come from your business being in trouble. Shame doesn't come from getting laid off. Shame comes from childhood trauma.
Wow.
Oh.
Wow.
And so it's whatever messages you received as a child that made you feel shame that you then try to cover up, overperform, fix by becoming this person that you now cover up, so you live this chameleon life. It's covered up. You don't even know it's there because you're so busy, as you were saying. As long as you're moving and you're doing the thing that is counter to what made you feel shame, that gives you a sense of control, that gives you a sense of feeling good about yourself, then you're good. And you never have to deal with that quietness that Colleen was talking about. But then life happens and it gets interrupted, right? And now you don't necessarily have those things, titles, positions, show, whatever, to lean on. Who are you now? And that's when shame creeps in. But that shame is not about your job situation. It's not about your financial or relationship situation. It's about what made you feel shame when you were a little
beginning.
And so now you have to deal with it.
If a person is trying now to get to that deeper place, right? That they've been overcompensating by all the things, doing all the things, but staying still, but resting, but having to be alone with their own thoughts. How can a person get there, from where Deya is describing into a place of wholeness and healing?
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you how I got there.
Well, I was just
asking. Sorry.
Well, my first thought is anyone who's moving from kind of busy life defined by what they do to life interrupted, no choice but to slow down, can't be whatever they were doing. First things first, I would get some community, get a spiritual director, a pastor, because I'd never encourage people to go on this journey alone. It can be dangerous. There's a fine line between being contemplative and self-reflective and straight up depression, so we need someone or some bodies around us. I've been praying a lot for people in this season, just hoping and praying that people have community to tap into. So that would be the first thing. And then it's a practice. There are ways to practice stillness, like in simple ways, like spend a day without any music or television. What does that feel like? What does it feel like to, at every turn, at every hour, just be in the silence? What else do you start to hear? I have been taking regular social media Sabbaths or full on phone off in a drawer all day, Sabbaths, because I think this connecting and healing from shame is so triggered by comparison, which is such the root of social media. It's like I'm very, very concerned about our relationship culturally to social media. We've invited this technology into our lives without question. And I think as a community of believers, we have to start questioning how much we are engaged with social media. I think we have to. People in Silicon Valley don't even like Mark Zuckerberg, but we are all up on his apps. People in Silicon Valley don't let their kids use Facebook, but we as a body of believers are just using it. Does technology have a spirit? Does social media have a spirit? I think so. And people have written so. And I think we have to start having those conversations. And those would be my big main things. Practice silence, get community, get a counselor, a therapist, a spiritual director, a coach, someone who can hear the thoughts that are going on in your head. Practice silence, take time away from technology. Those are my basics.
Nice. And what were you going to say, Deya?
Well, first of all, I echo everything that Colleen said. It's okay to need help. It really is healthy. It really is. And be honest about, well, yeah, that's enough. So let me just answer your question. I'm going to go back to the word why. In my journey where I felt lowest in my most recent history, of all the changes, and I really sought God's face about my why. And I started reading, which I also think is huge. Reading the word, reading books that are speaking to what you're going through really helped me to process what I was going through. And I recognized it from a spiritual perspective as the wilderness. What happens in the wilderness? In the wilderness, it looks like this. It looks lonely. It looks like everything that you define yourself by is changing. And usually in what I learned is the analogy of pruning is what was being used. And when you're in the vineyard and you're pruning the branches, it's so that the grapes can grow back healthy. And so what I had to do is when I got finished with my woe is me, why me, this is not fair. And I just asked God, why? What is it that you're trying to show me? And what he showed me was that I'm not bringing you through this to hurt you. I'm bringing you through this to help you, to prune you, so that you can grow back stronger and produce more. So sometimes you have to get things taken away so that you can get naked emotionally, spiritually, and otherwise, and get all that stuff off of you. Get clear in your head, like Colleen was talking about, and just really clear out the clutter. And a great example would be like having a junky closet, and you feel like, oh, I don't have anything to wear. But then you clean your closet, and suddenly you can shop in your own closet in things that you forgot that you had because you got too much stuff in there. And it's proven psychologically that when there's too much clutter, you can't think as clearly. And so we have to, in the same way, get spiritually cleared out or get our lives cleared out and be pruned so that we can find the very thing that's always been there, but that now needs to produce at a different level.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And to echo what you said, Colleen, too, about comparison, I know a lot of times when I have speaking engagements, I do talk about the curse of comparison, right? That we can look to the left and to the right and have a perception of other people, and we perceive them to be happier or to be more fulfilled or to be more successful or to be more wealthy or, you know, or to be married and therefore more healthy and wealthy and all these different things that we could look to the left and the right and make these assumptions and then therefore look at ourselves with, as you both said, shame, right? That somehow we are less than. But I love just this idea that we can sit with ourselves and that we can press out the noise and really begin to develop our own identity that is separate from the world and the noise and the chaos and the scrolling and all the things that can pull us away from, in some ways, having a very rooted and grounded life and experience. So I just wanted to wrap up, if there are any final aspects of advice that either of you would like to share. Colleen, I can start with you, you know, for people who are really trying to press into self-care in their mind, body, and spirit, if you have any closing thoughts of what they can do and also how they can contact you.
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, well, I guess in a way, because I had wanted to respond to Deya's just talking about the wilderness, but I can wrap up this way too, in that at some point earlier in our conversation, the scripture came up for me, one of my favorites in Hosea, says, "Then I will allure her into the desert or the wilderness and speak tenderly to her." You know, it's like I love a wilderness season. You know, I'm weird like that.
Right, I'm like, everybody that I know is trying to get out of the wilderness. You're like, bring it on.
Because this is how I will wrap up, because I believe what God desires from us above all is intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not productivity or doing his will. It's love. It's love, period. And in the wilderness, when you are in this extremely vulnerable place of being stripped of everything, uncertain about everything, and alone feeling, this is where God shows up and reminds us the truth that is written on our hearts and planted in the belly of our soul, which is that there is no such thing as alone. Alone. I am in God. God is in me. This was Jesus's last prayer before he left this world for his disciples, that we would be one, that they would know that I am in the Father and the Father is in me and I am in you and you are in me. It's like this relationship that we have with God is so intimate, completely rooted in love, and nothing can separate us from our relationship with God, because the kingdom of God is within. You know, we are actually the temple of God. But I just, my heart, my contemplative heart is to always be encouraging and reminding us that being the temple of God literally means that God dwells in us. And I think in our losing some of the mystic component of the old tradition of our faith, the Christianity, I'm not sure if we really grasp how how real and how mysterious and how magical almost it is to be a Christian. It is to be found in Christ, and as a result to be in God, and if we know this in our heart, we can go anywhere because we're never alone. We can be anywhere, on the mountaintop or in the valley, in the wilderness or on a beach sipping a pina colada.
Can't wait for those days to come back.
Oh.
How can we find you, follow you? If we want to get more information about Soul Care LA, how can we find you?
Yes, well, go to soulcarela.com, and you can contact me there. I am on Instagram still, at Collie Mae, COLLIEMAE. But the website is probably the best way, soulcarela.com, or you can email me, info@soulcarela.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Deya?
I love how Colleen has been talking about it's a practice. And I'd like to say that self-care is a practice that is required daily. And I think one of the most essential ways to do it right now is gratefulness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not some new age word. It's literally counting up your blessings one by one, and recognizing how it's the simple things. Quick way to wrap it up. Was doing an interview with a woman who had a stroke. She lost her ability to swallow. She is now a teacher, teaching online during COVID-19, all this stuff. And she still can't speak as clearly, but what she said was, I remember when I could not swallow for months. So to get up in the morning and have a cup of coffee, I savor every sip. And so it's all about mindset and perspective. You can think about all the stuff that you don't have, but if you can really become grateful for the basics, right? A roof over your head, the ability to speak. You may not be exercising your talent the way that you used to, but now you have all these new opportunities virtually to do all these things. I mean, so it's all about mindset. And so practicing gratefulness will then open you up and clear out the clutter, right? Make room for these new things that you can do. So figure out the basic things that you do have, and celebrate them and honor them and watch them pay you back, and it will.
So great. And how can we follow you, Deya?
You can find me everywhere on social media at DEYA Direct. My website is DEYA Direct. And please take a listen to the Super Pow Her podcast, which is the word super, pow, and her just had, and so power is just that extra H in the word power. Please join us, listen to episodes, talking about all this good stuff, and comment.
Yeah.
Oh, and you can find my books on Amazon. They're all on Amazon.
Excellent. Well, I love you both so much. You are so inspiring and refreshing. I feel very refreshed and renewed today. I hope everybody listening does too. So thank you so much for taking the time. And I really hope that we all will develop our own self-care practice moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, Edwina.
Edwina.
Bye.
Bye.